Fantasy football used to be all about the late round quarterback, finding that Konami code rusher who was going to win you your league. Just look at Lamar Jackson in his first MVP season, drafted in double-digit rounds and a huge league winner. Nowadays, it's all about taking earlier quarterbacks like Lamar himself, Josh Allen and Jaden Daniels. But that doesn't mean that there aren't quarterbacks available late down the board who can win you your league this season. In this video, I'm going to run you through 4 who I think are being drafted way too late, but who I think have the potential to be sleepers and win leagues in 2025. If you like this video, please consider liking and subscribing, but let's get into it with the first quarterback, who might not be going that late, but clearly has league winning upside. First up, we have Justin Fields, currently going as the quarterback 11. Now, I will appreciate that Justin Fields isn't exactly a late round quarterback, but he is probably going a fair amount later than I think he should be, and he certainly has the upside to finish as a top 5 quarterback. The problem with Justin Fields has never been his fantasy output. It's always been the ability to hold a real NFL job, and it was actually quite strange in Pittsburgh last season, where he was winning games, but not really producing for fantasy for the first few games of his career. But the important things about Fields are the rushing baseline that he represents. When you take a look at later round quarterbacks in the past few years who have massively outperformed their ADP, it has been a common factor that they need to have a rushing floor. We do have a little bit of a lack of later round rushing quarterbacks in the league right now, particularly if you look back to 2018 or 2019 when you could get Lamar Jackson all the way down in the 14th, 15th round, and that I believe was his MVP year. So you could get him so late on, and he won people leagues. If you drafted him that year, he won you leagues. Fields does have the same level of upside. He is a similar level of athlete to Lamar Jackson and has the ability to just break a play open and achieve huge upside week winning performances. What's also notable is that the Jets have put massive work into fixing their offensive line. Now, this is very important for Fields as he's someone that takes longer to throw than most quarterbacks in the NFL. So for him, working behind the line of scrimmage, being given a lot of time is going to be very important to him. The other thing is that I think it's debatable whether he might currently have the best weapons of his career in the NFL. Certainly, when you compare this to Pittsburgh last season, Garrett Wilson is a better receiver than George Pickens, and there's debate across the board as to whether the other weapons, including Bryce Hall, may represent slightly more value. Now, we prefer if the Jets had a more reliable wide receiver too, but his connection with Garrett Wilson and that connection going back to Ohio State is not something to be underrated. Justin Fields is actually someone who can contribute without any weapons on the field, especially with an upgraded offensive line, and out of any quarterback outside of the top maybe 3 or 4, if I were going to pick someone to win a week for me, it would be Justin Fields. Quarterback 11 might be slightly too late for him. It's not that late. I'd prefer him to be going a little bit later, but if he plays the full 17 games and if he can slightly improve his passing volume and passing efficiency, he can be a league winner this season. Next up, we have Drake Maye. Now, if you are a fantasy football fan, which you probably are if you're watching this, it is not going to be a huge surprise to you to hear an analyst talking about Drake Maye as a sleeper and as a late round quarterback that you need to be drafting. But one of the most important things about Maye that you need to remember is that rushing floor. Maye had over 30 rushing yards in over half of his starts last season and less than 24 rushing yards in only 2 of his starts. He is a fantastic scrambler, but also someone that can be used on design running plays, being a fantastic athlete, even if it's more in the Josh Allen, I'm bigger than you and I'm going to try and run over you mold, than in the Lamar Jackson or Justin Fields, I'm more nimble and I'm going to run round you or spin past you. Drake Maye has a rushing floor which, as we've already mentioned, is something you need to be looking for in later round quarterbacks. Now, last season he did perform across a few games with a fair few finishes inside the top 12, but this was with the worst receiving core in the NFL and one of the worst offensive lines. This offseason, the Patriots have gone out and improved both, and I don't think they've improved them a small amount. I think they've made huge upgrades. They drafted Will Campbell in the first round, but also went and got Morgan Moses Moses as their starting right tackle, which is going to be huge upgrades for Drake Maye's ability to stay and work from the pocket. Then at the wide receiver position, they got Stephon Diggs as their wide receiver 1, added Kyle Williams in the draft, but also added Travion Henderson, probably the best pass-catching back in the draft whose name isn't Ashton Genty. That's a clause that I have to add to so many sentences this offseason. They're good at this. They would be so good at this if it wasn't for Ashton Genty as well. Travion Henderson is explosive as hell, and every report out of Patriots camp is saying how effective he's looking as the third down option. With improved weapons, an improved offensive line, and the ability to run the ball, I think it's very unlikely that if he's healthy all season, Drake Maye finishes as low as the quarterback 18, and that's currently where you can get him. That feels like a steal to me. If you're enjoying this video, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel. I am so close to 600 subscribers and I would love for you to be with me on that journey. There's so much more great content to come and I can't wait to have you along for the ride. Click the button down here, I promise you won't regret it. Next up, another player who has been talked about a lot this offseason in Trevor Lawrence, currently going as the quarterback 21, but someone that I think you need to have your eye on. And this comes down to a few factors. The main thing which I think is going to be important for Trevor is not only the improved weapons with the addition of Travis Hunter, and also I think De'Ami Brown is going to be pretty important for this team, but the most important weapon they added was Liam Cohen. When you take a look last season at the way in which Baker Mayfield exploded, it was all about short volume passing. The Bucs were second in the NFL in terms of yards after the catch. Baker's ADOT dropped to the lowest in his career, but he had his highest ever mark in passing touchdowns. Baker was incredibly efficient in the passing game, even if it was about focusing on the screen game, underneath passing, and finding ways to get the ball into his playmakers' hands. Trevor Lawrence now has two of the best and most dynamic playmakers in the NFL, and running the Liam Cohen offense is going to be huge for this. Even if you just look at explosivity in the screen game from the running backs, Travis Etienne and Bashal Tutin are two explosive backs. Trevor Lawrence is going to find the game so much easier next year, compared to last year where he had his highest ADOT of his career and his highest deep passing percentage. Now, it was obviously a very disappointing season for him, but I think Liam Cohen running this offense is going to be very important. The second point comes from a really underrated rushing ability. Trevor Lawrence is a very mobile athlete and someone who can definitely use his legs to break a play open and stretch for first downs. But when you take a look at the way in which Baker Mayfield was used last season, someone who is definitely not as agile a quarterback as Trevor Lawrence, he had his highest ever mark on the ground. This is something that Liam Cohen has spoken about using the quarterback's athleticism to open up the game a little bit more. With an athlete like Trevor Lawrence, who is way quicker and way more agile than Baker Mayfield, as stocky and as much grit as he has to try and break through tackles, this will open up new dimensions in the Jaguars' offense and will help establish Trevor Lawrence to have a much firmer baseline on the ground. The other point which I think is important is I still don't think the Jaguars defense looks amazing. They are lacking at edge rusher outside of Josh Hines-Allen, and I think they could struggle with cornerback depth outside of obviously now Travis Hunter. So if the defense is bad and the offense is much improved, that leads to a hell of a lot of passing volume. And with that rushing floor expanded with the addition of Liam Cohen, I think Trevor Lawrence is in for a huge bounce back year. Finally, we come to the quarterback 27, Bryce Young, a player who a lot of people are now talking about as someone who could break out this season. Now, Bryce Young took a huge leap towards the end of last year after being benched at the beginning of the season. But in his last 7 games of 2024, he finished as a top 10 quarterback 3 times and scored 5 rushing touchdowns. Now, this is one of the really important things that I think people aren't thinking about with Bryce. He is an incredibly mobile quarterback, and Dave Canales showed the year previously with Baker Mayfield how he likes to move his quarterbacks around. Dave Canales has actually always liked using a mobile quarterback, and these rushing scores could be a consistent feature for Bryce Young. He is playing behind a good offensive line, as much as it could do with a little bit more development. But one of the important things about Bryce Young is bringing in Tetairoa McMillan. Tech McMillan doesn't just provide an alpha target receiver for Bryce Young, he also allows the other weapons to fall more naturally into their roles. The Panthers were trying their best to make Xavier Legette an alpha outside X receiver last season, which isn't really what he should be used for. Legette works better with manufactured touches and working horizontally rather than vertically. Bringing in McMillan will allow the Panthers to use Legette and other receivers like Adam Thielen and Jalen Coker in more natural roles. But I don't want to understate how important I think bringing in McMillan is going to be. I had Ted McMillan as my wide receiver 1 in this class, and I think he compares quite similarly to someone like Drake London from a few seasons beforehand. I think he is a true alpha who can dominate on the outside, but also has rare movement ability considering his huge size. But it gives Bryce Young a number 1 target, and it's something that he'd so drastically needed last season. Bryce Young finally started showing that clutch gene down the stretch that he showed all throughout his time at Alabama, and if he can pull things together this season, he has the upside to finish way above quarterback 27. Do I think he can finish as a low-end QB1? Probably the margins are just about there. I think it's more likely he finishes as a high-end QB2, but the upside is way above where he's currently being drafted.